Okay, okay.
You look better than you think.
Oh,
Okay. So, so the courses, this course is a sort of a survey course, and we're going to sort of go through different layers of understanding of God. Okay, and it's based upon a series that, if you went to our website, and we're going to lose Ruth for a moment because I'm going to share my screen, maybe. Let's see, because then Ruth can see what I'm doing. Share screen, and share that there. Okay, so if you went to like our website and you clicked on Learn Adult Education, and then you saw this thing here, and then there's all these classes, and you go down to, I hope it's on this page. Okay, don't go to this page.
Oh.
I'm not on this page. Okay.
If we just go to our, I think our home page.
If we just go to the home page, okay, we can try that. And you go to here, it says Walking with God, click on More Info. It takes you to this lovely page here. And you can see that these are all the different sessions. And,
Just go there.
and they no longer have
Further
names on them.
down.
Okay.
That's it. I thought that's what
Okay,
it's
just hang on. Okay, but click here. Okay, this is a lot of clicking.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. But for each session, there is a PDF book. I actually have a physical book of it, which I was going to bring to the room, but I didn't, so shucks. And so for this class, we're going to be using God in Introduction. And it's mostly essay stuff, okay? Which means we're going to be doing a lot of reading and discussing today, which is not my favorite. I'd rather be learning and discussing. And if you go to like next week's materials, like God in the Bible, you'll see that blah, blah, blah. Okay, yeah, there's an essay, don't read the, you can read, there's an essay you can read, and then there's actual text that we can study, okay? So I like studying text. Now, the course is set up with the assumption that we're all gonna be into frutas and we're gonna study independently together and then report back to the group, and that's not gonna happen because we're a small group and we're just gonna plow through these things. But the idea is to get a sense of the ever-evolving understanding of the ineffable. Does that make sense?
We can't understand it, but we'll get more understanding of what we can't understand.
Right. God is.
Well said.
There we go. We don't know what God is, but we'll get more confused about it as we go along. How about that?
That makes more sense.
Okay. So let's go back to, so any questions at this point?
We're just confused, right?
Okay.
As we should be.
Okay. But so this is a class that, you know, you can read ahead, and there are essays that you can read. You don't have to, but you'll get more out of it. The more you put into it, the more you'll get out of it. So this particular class, there are about 4 essays that I wanted to look at. And, so I have 2 handouts. One is a schedule, which is just the different units and the dates, which in an ideal world was on the webpage, but now it just says which those things are, but it might come back.
If we have copies of it. We have good copies.
Yeah. Sorry?
Check it on the webpage.
Right. Yeah. No, well, that one is just in case you want to know. And then here's the text that we'll be looking at today. I'm going to put it up on the screen, but like some people like to have a written copy in front of it. And here's where I'm going to get a little bit I don't know, dangerous. Does everyone have a copy of this, or?
It's coming around.
Really?
I have
Okay.
a question.
Yes.
Once this class is over, will
Yep.
we still be able to access those readings online?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm glad
thinking
you
in
asked
case
that.
I don't get to some of them.
I'm glad you asked that. In fact, if you went to the AJU, the American Jewish University website, you can get all of these things and different courses too. They're all there. Okay? We just simplified the links for you, even though we buried it inside 3 different links you have to go through to get to them. Yes.
Oh, you didn't have it.
Okay. So going forward, I don't want to have to print up these things for you. If you want to bring it, you can bring it. Otherwise, I'll put the text up on the screen.
Yeah.
Does that sound reasonable?
We can fit it in one.
That's right. That's right. Okay.
It's also ecological.
Ecologically said. Okay.
Somebody else puts the same thing.
So what I want to do is, now that we have officially started, let's actually start. So why don't we just quickly go around the room, and we'll come to Ruth Shapiro last because she's behind me. And just a sense of what your expectations are. You know, what are you hoping to get out of this course? Because if I know what the expectations are, I can have a better sense of when I'm not meeting them.
Just a better understanding of what God is. And I guess my biggest question about God is how he could let bad things happen.
Okay, why bad things happen? God's morality. Good, that will come up. And if it doesn't, we'll make it come up. Okay.
It's the same, something similar, more what is God? What does that mean? The presence of God in a person's life? How does God manifest God's self?
Okay. How do we encounter God?
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's good.
Well, I can plan to be here, but there's no reason why I can't be.
Oh.
So. And anyway, I guess as a historian, I'm interested in the changing ideas of God over time periods. And how what we think of today as God, how is it different from what Jews used to think.
Okay. Evolution of the God idea.
Mhm.
Good. Okay.
Actually, thinking about get out of it class is very similar to what Harriet had, in that it's very interesting to contrast what the early Israelites thought about God, and also look at God's commandments, precepts, all right, which might be a little different than what was in the Torah. And how we interpret all this nowadays and see how things change.
I guess for me, it's not just the intellectual pursuit, which I think is very, very broad and can also be very in-depth and interesting, but also just, personal for me. I think I probably spent a good part of my life trying to anchor myself in terms of, what God is. Is there a God? If there's not a God, what is there? Because I do believe there's something. So that's where I'm coming from. With a very open mind.
I guess I would say I'm interested in what the Jewish concept of God is and how that differs from other religions. Why we all keep finding that
So I don't know that we're gonna do that much comparative views. I think just getting Jews to agree on what we think about God is
No.
enough without
They'll never-
bringing in any other group. But it is good, that's a good thing to know. Ruth, what about you?
I guess I would have a mix of what has been said already with an emphasis on the historical view, as Harriet said, but I'm also interested in different language to allow a new way in to God, both with the people that I work with and to have contemporary language that I think is challenging for us in our rational society today.
So let's look at the first text. And the first text is, I printed you the 4 texts. So, and that's all this is, a whole bunch of essay here. There we go. Ruth, are you able to see that on the screen?
Yeah. Mhm.
Great. So can I have a volunteer to read for us at least the first paragraph of this essay? Sure.
As an atheist, I was unable to justify even the simplest moral claims. For many years, I had no theoretical grounding for assertions as clear as raping my sister is wrong, murdering the Jews in Nazi Germany was wrong. If there is no external, non-human source of morality, then the most I could assert is that I think raping my sister is wrong, but the rapist thinks it is right, and the matter must rest there. Even more upsetting, if morality is based on human or social need, a Nazi could make an irrefutable agreement that Germany's need required the execution of millions of Jews. Not that Jews were really a threat, but that the German people needed a scapegoat. And if consensus is our basis of morality, there certainly were more Germans than there were Jews.
Okay. What do you think of this argument so far? This is the argument from the inefficiency of atheism. Do you buy it?
I can't go with it very well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me what you don't like about it.
Oh, well, it doesn't concern more morality, it brings morality in with utilitarianism.
Right.
Everyone can make an argument.
Yeah.
So that is reason right.
He seems to be making the claim, I think, that without God, there's no such thing as morality. I don't buy his argument. I think there's lots of very moral atheists out there. I think John Rawls wrote an incredibly long book, which I read once, on exactly how we could come up with a system of morality and justice. But for him, he thinks that unless there's some outside source telling us what morality is, there's no morality for him. Okay, I'm not convinced by him so far, but let's give him 2 more paragraphs.
For me, the only way to ground morality into a system which didn't collapse was to place moral authority beyond human judgment. God is the source of morality. We may understand God's moral imperative imperfectly, but that does not make the imperative or its source any less real than an imperfectly transmitted letter would render its author's existence false. God has planted in each person a moral force akin to our drive for food, sleep, and sex. Just as with those other drives, they can be denied, perverted, or rationalized away, but they are real nonetheless. God is the reason why raping my sister is not simply wrong in my opinion, but wrong. Why murdering Jews cannot be justified on grounds of social utility.
Okay. Is he improving his argument at all?
Well, I think he's destroying what he said before.
Okay.
He's basically saying, what I said in the last paragraph can't be true.
Okay. It can't be true that we need a God to enforce morality?
It can't be true that morality can't be based on human or social needs, and that there is probably no consensus or basis of morality, but there's certain things that you could know to be true.
Okay, so he's saying morality comes from an outside source, right? What's the problem with this argument? Just
He's an atheist, I don't understand.
Well,
Maybe I don't know what an atheist
he's starting out
is.
as saying as an atheist he was unable, but now he's come to God, right? This is a guy who's found faith.
Oh, now
Right?
he's, oh.
I mean, I
Now
think
he's a
that's
rabbi.
what he seems to be saying,
Oh,
right?
okay.
He's making an assumption, I think, that God is moral. Let's step back from that a moment.
Yeah.
Is God necessarily moral?
We tend to think he is, don't we?
Well, maybe God's self could be amoral.
Uh-huh.
He's not immoral, and doesn't seem always to be moral.
Uh-huh.
So God, morality are not the same thing.
Right, but his argument is that God is necessarily moral, and therefore morality has a basis because we have this outside norm that we can pull to. Okay?
If you can buy it, that's
If you
fine.
buy it. I'm really not buying him, but that's okay. Let's give him one last paragraph.
It might be argued that moral treatment of people derives from human equality. Such an assertion cannot be demonstrated exclusively through reason, and I must treat it as a dogma of faith, one which I share. People are clearly not equal unless we have something perfect with which to compare them. Some are brighter than others, some stronger, some richer, some better looking, and some are weak, stupid, poor, and ugly. There must be an outside point of view of comparison, one whose nature is so radically different from that of any person, however wonderful, that in face of that other, all people are essentially equal. What?
Hmm?
No, that's a point for comparison. I missed something. I missed the line. One whose nature is so radically different from that of any person, however wonderful, yeah, I said that, that in face of that other, all people are essentially equal despite their distinctions. Okay, well, could get that. People are equalized in comparison with the eternal Holy One. It is through God that the moral argument that all people are equal gains force. Created equal, in fact.
Okay.
Now, maybe God people might have been created equal, but they're not all
Right.
necessarily equal.
Right. Okay, so this sounds kind of like which philosopher?
I would say Buber a little bit.
Okay, Buber a little bit. Yeah.
Don't know.
Plato, I think, a little bit in the notion that there has to be some ideal norm that you can compare something with. If I don't have the ideal chair, I don't know what a chair is. If I don't have the ideal human, how can I say what a human is, whether one's good or better or this or that? I mean, there's a hint of it, at least for me there is. Ruth, tell me more about how Buber fits into this.
Well, I don't know. I would say that I guess on the I, thou, I, it is that everyone has a part of the creator in them, and it's through recognition of that and relationship of that that we experience God. I would say that. But I think this is very challenging. I think, there's so much to unpack, and there's so many gray areas here that it's kind of really hard to narrow in. But I think B'Tselem Elohim is a concept that does allow for me a morality. And I get that concept from God. So I guess that's the other thing that I would want to say.
So this is surfacing some deep views on our part, right? Whether we're agreeing with him or disagreeing with him, we have this way, being in God's image, that's something important, right? And, okay, let's hang on to that.
Well,
Yeah?
one thing in that paragraph there that I don't think he emphasized enough, or maybe he did or not, is that, when we discuss God and try and understand it, it's a matter of faith.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I mean, if you could come to God solely through reason, then half the world would who does reason, come to that conclusion. So the point of believing in God is a matter of, boiled down to, is really a matter of faith. We just can't go too much against your reason.
Right,
So if you believe in a God that is unreasonable, that could be a problem.
right, okay.
But it's not a matter, you could be reasoning all the time and there'll be the atheists who reason just convincingly otherwise.
So maybe we want to have some standards for God, right?
Some ground rules or something like that.
Yeah, some expectations for God. Harriet, you're frowning.
Of course.
So there was a philosopher a couple of centuries ago, he raised a problem that he said that anytime we say that God is behaving in ungodlike ways, like murdering people or being mean, we are imposing our morality code onto God and not the other way around. And it's kind of a hard critique to get around. Okay, let's try another one of these essays. Okay. Yeah, why don't you- This is version 2.
Okay. One cannot consider the existence of God from a neutral position. One can act as a believer and see if the promises made to a believer are true, or one can act as a non-believer and judge the merit of non-belief. Experience is rich and divergent enough, filled with wonders and horrors, to the point that its testimony is eloquent in both directions, regardless of one's position.
Okay, what does he say?
Well, maybe it's something very similar to what we were talking about last, is that, ultimately you can argue what you want,
Okay,
but, you either believe or you don't believe.
okay. You can argue about this. Okay. Now he's going to go deep, right? So let's hear the next part. Promise this is the last time we'll have so much English.
Me? Sorry. But when I say the Aleinu, I know that I stand before the ruler of space and time and that we have a shared relationship. When my wife lights the Shabbat candles, I know that we are enjoying a gift from the Holy One, and enjoying God's company and love. When I spend a night in a shelter for the homeless, I know that I am God's ally. And when I speak about a Jewish response to the possibility of nuclear holocaust, I am caring for creation and thereby serving the Creator.
Okay. So how is this different?
It seemed like
Centering it in an experience of mitzvot, of what he's actually doing. But I don't know, I find that it's I guess the same experience I've had when I've had Orthodox teachers teach the Bible. You can't get out of someone an experience that they've never had. I guess I don't buy that he was an atheist. I mean,
Yeah.
his whole he sees things through a particular lens, and that's obvious to me here.
So as he's talking about encountering God, he's doing stuff with God. It's like, what's Shabbat dinner, right? We're sitting down to, okay, what was the sacrificial system? The sacrificial system was visceral. We're having a meal with God, okay? Here's the animal, we've killed it, we've cooked it, and here, God, as represented by the priest, you'll eat some, and here, me, represented by me, I'll eat some, and we'll burn the fats, and God will eat those, and we're like sharing a real thing here, right? Or I'm lighting candles, I'm doing stuff, I'm feeling God's presence. But am I really feeling God's presence, or am I just feeling spiritual and in the moment? And I think maybe, Ruth, that's your critique here. right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So let's give him another paragraph.
So many experiences in my life point to God's reality. No, that is too pale. Many of my experiences point to God's love and involvement. I have been richly blessed, and the very ability to perceive those blessings is itself another pointer to God.
Okay. So he's having a personal spiritual life. That's nice. Doesn't work for everyone, right?
Yeah.
You know, what gets me is astronomy, okay? Astronomy is my bugbear, right? Because once you kind of zoom out from the universe, or you zoom out from the world, it gets very empty. And there's like this huge globular space, light hours across. That's pretty much empty, and it's been sort of cleared out by these planets in a disk that have cleared out their zones and sort of lumped together everything that was in that whole circle to make a flat disk. And there's like a planet here, and then there's like nothing forever. And then like there's another planet, then nothing forever, right? And if you look at it to scale, it really freaks me out, okay? And when you go out in the night sky and I look at the stars and they're like, okay, first of all, the moon is just hanging there. It's like, why is that not crashing down on us, right? And the stars, it's like, that is impossibly far away and I can see it. It makes me wonder what is going on and why is life on this planet so different than the celestial world out there, right? And I think that there has to be something going on. This can't all be an accident, right? That and eyeballs. Okay, eyeballs really get me.
Eyeballs.
Eyeballs.
You're not used to eyeballing things?
No. I'll tell you what it is. Like I like the theory of evolution. Theory of evolution says things evolve towards better product, right? And yeah, I can see if you go to the Galapagos, you go to those islands, and you see on this island, the birds that had longer beaks had an advantage, and so longer beaked birds got, and you can go to different islands, and there's an island where all the human beings are only 3 feet tall because that just made sense for that island, right? But that's a gradual process of self-selection, right? But each stage was good, and then the next stage was slightly better. But the intermediate stage don't make sense. I mean, to get from protoplasm to a functioning eyeball with an iris and muscles and all those things, the in-between steps don't convey any benefit whatsoever, right? The end product is good, but it's like 10,000 steps away from, ooze. And that maybe there's some design going on here, right? And if you've got design, maybe you've got a designer, right? That's what boggles me. By the way, you've heard of the argument from design, right? Intelligent design, sure. If you're walking along the beach, right, and you find a watch, you don't think it just evolved there, right? A watch, and you open it and it's got hands and it's got gears and it winds, it's got a mechanism and it works. You think, wow, there must be a designer. That's a classic argument of God from design. It doesn't answer the question how many designers there were, and if they were good designers or if they were really kind of run-of-the-mill designers.
Could be more than one.
Why not? How do you know? I mean, it's like if you look at the Tesla, how many people designed that thing?
So the more people realize that we discover the problems so quickly.
Ruth, please.
Yeah, I mean, I love what you're bringing up, and Rabbi Akiva Tatz really has a lot to say about evolution. And the thing is that we just take it as fact, but it is called evolutionary theory. there is so much that is still questionable about the evolutionary theory, one of which is, human beings are the only ones, quote, animals, who cry the way we cry. What is the function of our eyelashes when other animals don't have eye? I mean, there's so much that is in that intelligent design that you're talking about, and we tend to dismiss it. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, it boggles my mind. It kind of freaks me out. Okay, it's just like, that's way too complex, right? But it all seems to be variations of the theme. DNA is kind of universal to everything, right? Bees have DNA, we have DNA. It's like someone had a toolkit and, they are making stuff. But if you put DNA out there, it'll flop into things. But it doesn't tell us anything about who had the toolkit, right? Okay. Is there a difference between God's reality and God's love? I don't know that I'm getting God's love in his arguments. I think he's trying too hard. I think he's trying to argue from a very intellectual, he's trying to talk God into existence, right? Which is not what our tradition does, really. Our tradition just kind of assumes God and moves on, right? We don't prove God, we just assume it, right? It's like in mathematics. You all remember geometry, right? If you have a point, you can prove a line. If you have a line, you can prove a plane. And then you can prove a three-dimensional space, and you can prove all sorts of amazing things if you have a point. But you can't prove the point, you have to assume it. So you can't prove God, you can only assume God, which is annoying.
No, it's a matter of faith.
Yeah, I think it depends on who you are, because I think there are many people who feel they do have proof of God.
Many people think they have a point.
I mean,
Good line.
And Lord knows, belief in powers greater than us is older than humanity and widespread. I'm unaware of any ancient atheist societies.
No.
Anthropologically, I'm just not aware of any group that just went, the pure logic.
Well, because some things have to be explained somehow.
Right. And religion is the science of the day. It explains stuff. My kids ask why the sky is blue, and I explain about, light diffraction.
Mm-hmm.
It's an explanation. Okay. Third leg of my perception of God stands for two enormous miracles. This is text 3. First is life itself. The second is hiding under here. The second is the continuing vitality of the Jewish people. Okay. Well, I'm going to read this paragraph. I have no explanation for the fact that I, a composite of carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphate, and sulfur, can think, feel, and behave. I find this fact staggering and silencing. 1 minute, alive and able to laugh and cry, the next second the body lies lifeless, simply a pile of elements like any other. In our ability to maintain our own health, to renew creation every day, to impose our will on the environment, including our ability to reproduce, again, acting as creators, and to make moral judgments, distinguishing between good and evil, I perceive a godlike ability. It testifies to me of God. Now he's maybe getting somewhere. No, Ruth doesn't think so.
I'm
Neither Ruth thinks so. Ruth Shapiro, please.
Yeah, well, there is the miraculous in our very own bodies. We don't also focus on that fact, that our cells exactly, or the cells of all creation, if you take the DNA of a human cell, right, it holds the DNA of that entire person, but yet in our own development, the certain cells know to be fingers, certain cells know to be toes, but yet if you take them and look at them, they look the same. How do they know how to be fingers or toes, or a head or a nose? I mean, it's just too fantastical. So yes, I mean, he's not going into as much depth as I would like. He's not convincing. He could be convincing, I guess. He could be even more convincing.
So I remember they did some studies and they took cells from, a chicken's wings and put it on its feet, and they grew a little bit of wings on their feet. I don't know what it was, but it was like the cells know what they're supposed to be based upon who they're neighbors with.
They're programmed.
It's rules of how to fold things. It's all about folding the proteins. Okay, Ruth, you want to give us a paragraph from your vantage point in the ether?
Yeah, finally, I look at the Jewish people. History knows of no other example of a people who were separated from their land for most of their history, who lacked the power to govern themselves or the stability to control their destiny, who nonetheless retained a strong and continuous identity. Yet we did just that. There are no weekly meetings of Edomites in Brooklyn or of Hittites in Los Angeles, but not a day goes by in which the descendants of ancient Israel do not meet with the express purpose of participating in and strengthening that unbroken identity. We not only know we are Jews, we care about it. Jewish creativity continues unabated.
Okay, the miracle of Jewish survival. Are we buying that one? Not a miracle?
No.
I do to an extent.
Okay, good. Okay, Harriet says no.
Everybody is a miracle. And every group has its own history. Yes, our history is longer, but I don't know that the Jewish God is different from any other God. And even though we might see it differently, I'm not convinced by that.
Yeah, I think the Jews have had a tremendous strategy, right? By converting ourselves into a people with a common language based upon a book instead of a location. We've done really, really well, right? A portable nationality. So yeah, the Edomites aren't around anymore, but neither are the Israelites. Let's be fair here. Okay, we're not Israelites. We're Jews. We're rabbinic Jews. We've only been around for 2,000 years.
We're not even Carabites.
No. And the more I learn about the Karaites, the more it's like half the population was Karaites in the 12th century. The Karaites had this tremendous library. We owe the Torah in its current form, with all the dots to the Karaites, and they're lost to history because they had the misfortune of writing everything in Arabic. And so, if you want to buy a Karaite commentary on something and translate it to English, it's like $285 for the Book of Ruth. It's like, come on. It's all academic press, right? So it's like, I took a class with a woman, she's a scholar. She speaks a very mean Arabic, but mean, I mean very good.
Yeah.
And she's working on a translation of Yafet ibn Ali, I think it's the name of the commentator. And she's going to make it free to download for anyone because she wants to get the Karaite commentaries out into the world. The greatest receptacle of Karaite thought is Ibn Ezra in his commentary because he quotes them all the time. He yells at them, but he quotes them. Now I have to tell you who Karaites are, right? Like, who here has no idea what a Karaite is? Yay! I need to explain. Okay. So, digression. So, over Jewish history, there have been different sects and different groups, right? And the rabbinites, the rabbis, have been the most successful. And the rabbis say there are two Torahs. There's a written Torah, what God was written down, in the scripture, and there's an oral Torah that God told Moses, and Moses told Joshua, and Joshua told the elders, and the elders told, and it went down, and the rabbis remember it, right?
Yeah.
And so it's this big, huge thing that's bigger than the Bible. And the Karaites basically said, no, when it says an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a bruise for a bruise, it doesn't mean 5 orders of compensation, compensation for lost income, compensation for insult and shame, compensation for healing, compensation for lost income earning potential, and compensation for pain. It means an eye for an eye. I mean, just, it's literal, okay? There is only one Bible, and we should just follow it, right? So the Karaites were this group that were kind of Jewish fundamentalists. But they kind of had a point, and they were very successful as well.
Where did they live?
They lived amongst the Jews. So if you look at the, I want to say Sasanian, but it's not. If you want to look at the Arabic, the caliphate, right after Islam comes in and Muhammad comes in, you look at the caliphate, that whole big area, that's where most of the Jews are living, and the Karaites are spread out pretty much all over the place with them.
They started in what we call Babylonia, which was a different route.
Yep.
And then, but they're also very strong in Egypt.
Mhm.
And and they're still around. I mean, just not very many of them.
Right.
But there were Karaites in Russia, and there were, and during World War II, it was a question as to whether the Karaites were Jews or not. And the Jews were happy to say they're not Jews because that saved their lives.
Right. Right. Because one of the nicer things we've ever done for anyone is say, nope, you don't fit in. But I mean, the downfall of the Karaites is that they wrote everything in Arabic, and then everything shifted to Hebrew, and that which wasn't translated to Hebrew didn't exist. Okay, miracle of our existence. So let's read another paragraph here. Just the Jewish creativity began when we viewed our role as being God's people. Our earliest memories focus on the quest for God. We are not unique in the quality of our art, our cuisine, our architecture, or our music, only in our spirituality. He's making a very broad brush statement here. So I like our unique trait of spirit with our unique ability to survive. The fact is that people who claim to be God's chosen people have survived, despite all the overwhelming odds to the contrary. We testify, as the medieval Catholic Church understood so well, to God's concern and involvement in the world.
But we're not Catholics.
Yeah, I know. Okay, I always have a problem when someone says, we are the only group that does this. No, we're the only group that we know of who does this.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
I kind of think, like, what world is he living in? Is he not aware of other people's spirituality quests? I mean, it's so narrow. His view is so narrow.
well, yeah, I mean, along that line, if you grew up and lived in India, all right, the Jewish Christian idea of God is gone. I mean, it's not there. And there's what, 1.4 billion? Same thing in China. I mean, so how many, how unique is that when almost everybody who's not Judeo-Christian overwhelms? I don't know about the uniqueness.
Yeah.
And
At least as far as that goes.
example, because there are still Christians and Jews living in
I've read Islamic too.
Yeah, there are lots of Muslims. I mean, that is multicultural. However, I don't buy the fact that we're the only people who are so unique that we can't be compared to anybody else.
So I think he's coming from a traditional rabbinic point of view that says the world can be divided into 2 kinds of people, us and them. They have 7 mitzvot, we have 613.
Aren't we lucky?
They're obligated and in God's image, we're obligated in God's image. But they waste their time doing useless things, and we spend our time on pursuing to God's path. And there's lovely, text on this, which, at the end of studying Talmud, you see the stuff which is really, on the face of it, immensely egocentric and bigoted, but And it's like, okay, even the Elenu, okay? The Elenu basically says at the end of time, everyone's gonna come around to our point of view.
Because we're right and they're wrong.
Because we're right and they're wrong.
But that's what they always said about them.
Yeah.
They said that they were right and they were wrong.
Yeah. So,
Well, I actually don't see the Elenu like that. I see the Elenu as not necessarily our God, but a belief in the holiness of every human being through being created in the image of God. I mean, even, I don't know, I don't want to digress, but
and I think that's a very charitable reading of it, and you're certainly welcome to it.
And
Yeah,
that's which paragraph you're talking about.
well, yeah.
Also, doesn't this lay a foundation for questioning the needs of the state of Israel?
Oh, okay,
I mean,
well, flesh that out.
well, he says, that we're a people who, although we were separated from, their land, from most of history, we existed. So therefore, I think you can make the argument, gee, if he's right, then maybe we don't need the state of Israel. We can exist without it.
So I'm gonna tell you straight up,
Yeah.
we did really great as a Jewish people without a state of Israel for the last, except for the last 70 years, we've been doing pretty good.
Right, Jews were growing and prospering.
And in fact, the state of Israel is creating more problems for Jews
That's
than it's solving, because I'm gonna tell you,
Yeah.
God forgive me.
Yeah.
Chatati lefanecha, I've sinned before y'all, but Israel is the only country I know of that still discriminates against Jews on an official level.
Mhm.
Because no other country will tell you, hey, conservative Jew, you can't get married in your religion to another conservative Jew. It's not real.
And God doesn't listen to you anyway.
Right, it's
It works against.
and I look at Israel and it's like, that's a whole different, we're just gonna package that back in the box. But let's assume that Judaism has worked really well as an exile religion, and being in the promised land has created new challenges.
Yeah.
That's a charitable way.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's great when you don't have a land of your own, you can talk about how ideal your land would be.
Yeah.
Once you have a land of your own, you have to deal with latrines and plumbing and,
Yeah.
then it's like,
Your neighbors and, yeah.
And the people who don't like you're in your land,
yeah,
or who think you're in their land.
Yeah.
well, and they may have a point.
Yeah.
Okay, let's look at this last essay, okay, essay number 4. Okay,
Okay.
let's bring in some other religions, okay. Let's start around the circle.
One of the striking facts about religious faith around the world is the array of ways in which human beings conceive of and worship the divine. The sacred claims a myriad of names: Aru, Mazda, Brahma, Nirvana, Wanko-Tekan, Osiris, Zeus, Jupiter, Wodan. Given how many names the divine is called, it is particularly striking that the Jewish conception of God doesn't have a name at all, or at the very least, our God's name is suspiciously like no name at all. God isn't a name, it's a job description.
Okay, all right,
There you go.
So we are worshiping a job description.
okay, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Moses, burning bush, who shall I say is sending me?
I am that I am.
I am that I am, Yud Hey Vav Hey, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay, just ignore that for a moment. Okay. There is an argument that the Jewish conception of God is different than the conception of many of the other deity systems. And there is a point to that. In other deity systems, whether you're looking at the Greek gods or you're looking at the Norse gods, and I have to limit myself that because when it comes to other god systems, those are the ones I'm most familiar with.
And Islam is different.
Right,
Yeah, it's not listed here.
right. That's okay. Well,
99 names for God, but.
well, look, the Karaites had a name for God, Allah, because that's God. Okay, so Every other god system, the gods are part of a larger system and they're subservient to it. So Zeus or Odin or whomever, they're subservient to fate. They can't change fate. Fate is more powerful than them, and they fear it. And they have a birth cycle and a life cycle and a death cycle. And they have narrative and they have stories. Whereas our God is that higher level that, we can have this notion that our God creates all the other gods and lets them do their things and have their fun, but our God is not bound to anything. Our conception of God is like
Way out there.
the big thing. And so all the other nations worship sort of the gods that reality has allowed to be created, but we worship the ultimate reality.
Don't Muslims
Of course they do.
and Christians? I mean, Christians
Well,
might look,
Christians are a little complicated.
yeah, they're more anthropomorphic than Muslims, but,
I think Christianity is kind of like a repackaged paganism, but don't
quote you.
quote me there. Okay. So, but let's say he has no name at all. God isn't the name, it's a job description. Okay. So, let's keep going here.
Our portion, Lech Lecha, mentions that Abraham built an altar to the Lord and invoked the Lord by name. What does it mean to invoke a nameless God by name?
Or Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Or
But Elohim is sort of a generic.
true.
God,
But in this particular passage, it's a P passage. So he's bringing in the Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, or it's a J passage. There's something going on. What does that mean? So let's get into the theory of naming things.
To name something is to reveal something about its essence, to exert a kind of control, to assert a comprehension of its nature, its limits, and its potential. Certainly, when the Torah says that Abraham called on God by name, it means to tell us that Abraham enjoyed an intimacy with God that others of his generation did not. True for Jacob, that's certainly true for Abraham, towards a good example. It teaches that Abraham to God was a thoroughness that no one before him could equal.
So to name something is to know something. This is great in science fiction and fantasy. Like if you name something, you own it, right? If you name something, you nail it down and you can describe it. Names have power, right? But they also put limitations on this. Okay, Abraham knew God. By the way, why are we choosing Abraham first? And why is God choosing Abraham? What did he do?
He first want to recognize that there was some kind of divine essence that.
Well, that's a midrash. It doesn't happen in the book.
But he appears.
He just appears on the scene.
And he's as good as anybody else. And actually, he's the ancestor of not just Judaism, but Islam and Christianity there too. So you could, Abraham had a good choice.
It's just, he seems kind of random to me, but that's a different
And can't be, now that's not random.
Ah, come on.
From within Fable Peacemaking, he's choosing the earliest ancestor to the monotheistic religions.
Okay, I'll give it to Abraham. At least he argues with God. Sometimes.
Yeah, but sometimes he doesn't, and you really.
Yeah. And yet, the name that Abraham knew sounds suspiciously like no name at all. Okay. Jack, tell us more.
And yet, okay, the name consists of 4 Hebrew letters, lacking vowels or hard consonants. The word is virtually impossible to articulate. It sounds like breath, like air passing in and out of the lungs. Perhaps it tells us that God is the breath of the universe.
Okay. A whole bunch of academics might disagree because they say use Yahweh all the time. It's okay.
But they happen to be Christian.
No, Jews too. A lot of Jews use the academic.
Yeah.
they don't use Jehovah, I mean, that's clearly an error.
But you're here, Bobby, so yeah, right.
Okay,
Get from ground.
Ruth?
And the history of that name reveals that Jews understood that they should treat that awkward word with reverence, for it was unlike any other name in the world. Its articulation was restricted to the holiest day of the year, Yom Kippur, by the holiest person in biblical Judaism, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, and the holiest place in the world, the Holy of Holies in the temple in Jerusalem. Since the destruction of the temple some 2,000 years ago, no observant Jew has pronounced that name the ineffable sign of our unique God.
Okay. I find that claim specious because Zioni Zeved is an observant Jew, and he was Yahweh all the
All the
time.
time, yes.
And he was at the same university.
Absolutely, and he teaches courses on it too.
We are being so mean to Brad Arts. I'm so sorry.
Well, you chose
Again,
it.
Chatati, yeah,
Because you chose a UJ,
I chose this because it had useful things later on. But these essays are interesting. Okay, it certainly starts us in a conversation, right? Okay, let's finish off this
Go, I guess.
Yeah.
Let's see, where am I
thing. Just saying.
Touche.
Oh, okay, touche. To say that God is ultimately unnameable is to suggest that the divine is ultimately beyond the totality of our experience, beyond our comprehension. Without actually being God, we cannot fully know God. What we can do, however, is to relate to God, to seek to embody godly traits, and in all of our actions, to cultivate God's loving presence.
Okay, so our friend in California has, with love, written a bedside Torah, and he's given us some thoughts on God. Helpful?
Interesting.
Interesting.
It's food for thought.
What's missing from his argument?
Personal relationships,
Personal relationships,
the I thou kind of thing.
Yeah.
Not there.
yeah. For me, it's text, which is where the course is going, right? We relate to God in our texts, right? We are a textual people. We love proof texts, and we love quoting text, and we love giving attribution to texts. And so far, he hasn't sent us anywhere. He gave us a verse here or there, but not really, right? I want to see how we relate to God on the biblical page. I want to see how we relate to God in Midrash, right? And that's what we're going to do. Look at how different generations have struggled with God. His is a very modern, a modern way of looking at God. But I'm not sure it's convincing. Yeah, Ruth.
Yeah, I would say that, for me, he's also missing, the third leg, which is, he talks about relations with other people and how brings God forward, or talks about maybe our relationship with God, although not so much, but really the relationship with our own soul is missing here. He talks about us being a spiritual people, and I didn't see anything in this that was of a spiritual nature other than comparatively disparaging other spiritual traditions. So that is the missing piece.
Okay, so we're not totally convinced. Okay, but it's an opening point for a conversation. So let me put the question to you. What does God mean to you?
Good question.
Still figuring that out.
And what's said here stays here. I'm not going to quote anything that you say to anyone else. What's learned here can leave here.
But it's being recorded, right?
Well, forget that.
We can take care of that.
Forget that.
We
Fine.
could take
Yes.
care of that.
What's said here is going to be recorded for posterity and forever. I don't know if we should be recording this,
I
you know?
perhaps not, do I can,
Yeah,
You can erase it.
Let's turn off the recording.
I personally have no
I've got a
problem
magnet
with
if you
that.
want, really
Yeah.
strong magnet.
I'm not sure if we should be recording this, I don't know.